Ahead on a special live edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen.
We're live tonight in our nation's capital to update you on the critical issues, legislation, and regulations that may impact the beef cattle industry.
And now, live from Washington, D.C., it's NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen with your host, Kevin Oxner.
Hello, I'm Kevin Oxner. Welcome to a special live edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Tonight, we're celebrating 500 episodes of this television program, a program founded back in 2007 on the idea of providing news, information, and education specifically for cattlemen and cattlewomen. It's been my pleasure to be a part of the Cattlemen to Cattlemen team, and I want to thank you for watching as we celebrate 500 episodes. Now, as I mentioned, we're live from Washington, D.C., a place where so much happens that can impact the U.S. beef cattle industry. We have a lot of ground to cover tonight on a wide range of policy issues, including what we might expect from the Trump administration. So let's get started. Joining me now is Senator Steve Daines, a Republican from Montana. Senator, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight.
So glad to be here tonight, Kevin. Thank you.
You know, we know that you have been such a strong supporter of opening the Chinese market to U.S. beef. What can we do to make certain that's a priority for the new administration?
Well, Kevin, I'm a fifth-generation Montanan. In fact, I just spent the last few days in eastern Montana with a cattleman on his Angus ranch there hunting mule deer together. So I heard a lot about cows over the last few days, a lot about the prices, certainly, but also about the opportunities. I was over in China the last week of May and met with the Chinese leadership, and we were asking them to remove that ban on U.S. beef imports. And we were grateful to hear in September that they're signaling they're planning to move forward now with removing that ban. That's the second largest import market in the world for beef. So it's so important for us. We think about it, there's about 95% of the world's consumers are outside the United States. We're about 5%. So as we think about our kids, our grandkids, how are we going to grow our herds? How are we going to keep prices up? It's going to be by exporting. So we're sending a strong message. I'm campaigning loudly right now with the new administration to make sure we understand that this is the right thing to do for our U.S. producers and to make sure that we don't lose any ground on this ground that we have gained right now with opening these markets up in China.
That's great news. And I guess the question becomes, why is trade so important, not only for Montana cattle producers, but for producers all across the country?
Well, it is. And again, I'm from a state, Montana, where our number one industry is agriculture. It's about $6 billion a year in Montana. We have 3 cows for every person in Montana. But if it were not for our export markets, we would not have the production levels that we have today in Montana and around the country. And so as we think, again, about the future, I think about Wayne Gretzky. They asked him, why are you a great hockey player? And he said, it's because I skate to where the puck is headed, not where it's at. So we got to think about where are the markets growing in the future here for our U.S. producers? Well, it's international markets. It's markets like China. And if we don't have access to those Asian markets, how are we going to keep our prices up? How are we going to keep growing our production?
And I guess the question becomes, many of us were a bit disappointed when we heard that Congress had decided not to take up TPP in this lame duck session. Given President-elect Trump's opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, what's your sense on what we can do to encourage the Trump administration to move forward with this?
Well, everybody seems to have something they don't like right now about TPP, but that's all part of negotiating a trade deal. So we've got to smooth off some of the rough edges. But I tell you, the folks who will gain the most from TPP is the ag industry. And we've got to keep that in the front of the minds of the new leadership coming to Washington with the Trump administration. I supported Donald Trump. I am thankful that we are not talking about President-elect Hillary Clinton. Grateful for what happened a week ago tonight. And now we have to continue to educate and make sure the new administration understands exactly how you connect the dots from trade policies to the pocketbook issues right now of American ag producers.
So another issue on the minds of, I know, a lot of your constituents is the resource management plans, and specifically the greater sage grouse. What's your position on that, and what kind of resolutions might be at store?
Boy, you know, I hear about sage grouse, particularly in our eastern part of Montana and western states. You know, it goes back to the Endangered Species Act. In fact, we had one rancher say the Endangered Species Act is like a 40-year-old ranch pickup. It once served a useful purpose, but it's in bad need of repair.
That's a
and
great
I think
point.
when we chat, again, I spent a lot of time just this past weekend with a great Montana ranch operation. They have both registered and commercial Angus, and ranchers are the lead conservationists in this nation. They know if they don't conserve the lands, the wildlife, they won't have something to pass on in the future for their kids. The problem we have with sage grouse is I think this is really about a command and control structure from the extreme environmentalists. It's not really about the sage grouse. It's about taking over a way of life here. And it really would have a significant impact on our way of life, certainly. So we've been pushing back, been working very, very hard with the Obama administration, telling them that we do not want to see the sage grouse listed as endangered species, because that would really it is a direct threat to our way of life in places like Montana.
Totally agree. It's so nice for you to come join us for this 500th episode, and more importantly, it's really encouraging to have folks like yourself up here who understand our business. Thanks for coming.
Well, I'm very glad to be here, and I feel a lot better if it's in a Carhartt jacket instead of a suit and tie, but you got to wear the uniform when you're back in D.C.
We'll get that the next time.
All righty.
Thank you. No doubt, what happens here in Washington, D.C. has big impact on farms and ranches across our country. We asked producers what message they want to deliver to policymakers here in Washington, D.C., and here's what they had to say.
My message to Congress is let's keep everything fair and equitable to all producers so everybody can be profitable.
You know, I think they need to really get to talking to the people on the ground and get, they live in a box back there and in the Beltway, and they just have no understanding of what goes on out in the real world. And we've got to figure out how to get it back there. And when we go back and try to tell our story, well, then you're a dirty lobbyist. And there's got to be a way that we can share the information and share the story of agriculture and the private business people with the Congress and the regulators out there and get some understanding.
Listen to us. We're trying to tell a story. We're trying to feed a world. What we want you to do is just take care of what is going on in our industry. We have issues we need resolve for. We have some issues that we don't really need help with. We can take care of them within the industry. It's become a bigger problem than what it used to be in past decades. We've really come into a time in our industry that regulation seems to be squeezing it pretty tight.
Well, I would like for Congress to do something. You know, Congress has gotten to the point where they tend to just talk, and you know, we need action. We need Congress to understand that if we don't provide food to the world, we probably don't have near the advantage as a country that we've historically had.
Now, if you'd like to support the work of NCBA in defending and advocating for the cattle industry in Washington, D.C., why not become an NCBA member? It's easy to do. Just call toll-free 1-866-USA-BEEF or visit the website beefusa.org. Joining me now to talk about some of the top issues facing cattlemen and women is Kendall Frazier, CEO of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, and Craig Uden, a cattleman from Nebraska and NCBA president-elect. Gentlemen, thanks so much for coming to Washington, D.C.
Thank you, Kevin.
Craig, I want to ask you, why is it so important for NCBA to have a presence here in Washington?
As a producer, I need to know that we have my interests protected every day. And why we have it in D.C. is the same reason the states have theirs in their capitals as well, because that's where the action takes place. That is where we're out there to educate and engage with these congressmen, this administration, so we need that. It's another tool in my toolbox for my industry.
Kendall, I'd ask you, now that we have this presidential election behind us, what's your sense of the outcome of that for beef cattle producers?
Well, first of all, Kevin, there was a loud voice that came from rural America directed at Washington, D.C., that there needs to be change. And that voice will mean a new Congress and a new administration. And we're hopeful that the regulatory environment that we've been under for the past several years will change, and that private property rights will be respected, and that the regulations that have been put on our industry we'll see no more of that. In fact, some that are on and proposed will be lifted.
And what's your sense of some of the key issues that need to be addressed before this lame duck session ends?
Well, Congress still has to fund the federal government, and there are two issues that are very important to the cattle industry that are going to be considered. One would be to make sure that the sage grouse, which is really important to Western ranchers, is not listed as an endangered species. The other one would be to stop EPA from implementing the Waters of the United States rule, which is a massive intrusion on private property rights.
You know, Craig, we just heard from Senator Daines talking about Trans-Pacific Partnership. What's your outlook, and where do we go from here relative to the TPP?
Well, you know, we heard a lot of rhetoric with the campaigns, but trade is vital for our industry. As we see our protein and other proteins growing in the U.S., if we want to maintain viability for our industry, we have to have access and a place to go with this product. You know, 96% of all people live outside of our borders. There's growing GDPs out there, and they're looking to fulfill their diets. We might as well fill that challenge, and we have a very wholesome, safe, delicious product produced by the best producers in the world. So we need that access.
One last question to both of you. As we look at this new Congress and new administration, what is NCBA's plans for getting folks up to speed on the beef industry and the priorities of our industry?
First, over the last years, we've greatly expanded our Washington office and our presence here in Washington, D.C. We've added staff and resources into our Washington office. So we've got to reach out now to the new administration and new Congress and rebuild some relationships that we've had for a long time and build some new relationships, Kevin.
And what would you add, Craig?
Well, I think it is all about relationships and having Congress and Senate understand our issues as well as this administration. We think that there's a lot of opportunities here, but there's always going to be challenges in the beef industry. So we have to stay engaged with our congressmen because that's who's going to make the vote, and that's who's going to help us with our issues out there.
Thanks so much for coming. We'll talk to you both just a little later. We've mentioned the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and although it appears TPP won't be taken up before the end of the year, it's a crucial step if we hope to grow exports. Let's hear from some others about their views on TPP.
You know, foreign trade is a big priority for cattlemen. Trans-Pacific Partnership is the trade agreement of the day. We see trade as the key to markets for the future generation of cattlemen in this country. TPP will tie together the largest trading bloc in the globe when it's brought successfully together. For the cattle and beef industry, bottom line, we need this agreement.
Well, TPP, as you know, involves 12 countries, 40% of the global economy, and some of the largest and fastest growing markets in the world. So if you take a country like Japan, we face a 38.5% tariff on our beef exports. That'll go down to 9% ultimately. In Vietnam, which is a country of 90 million people, growing 6% a year, an emerging middle class that wants more protein, better quality food. They want American-made products. They want American-raised beef. Those tariffs will go to zero.
It's interesting to see the number of excuses that we have heard about not supporting TPP. The one thing that we hear other groups are concerned about, what might happen. A lot of what-if scenarios. I think what's different about us in the cattle industry is we can point to the what is happening to us right now, and that is the loss of almost $300 million a year by not having access to the terms of the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
I think continuing to have your voices heard and to make clear both the opportunities that you see in TPP, but also the serious costs of delay and how we're already seeing the impact on beef and cattle exports of more than $120 million a year by your estimates, based on what other countries have already negotiated with each other. That's a very compelling story, and it's important for Congress to understand this has real implications for real people, for real communities, and the cattlemen I think are very effective in conveying that.
NCBA has a daily presence on Capitol Hill, and joining me now are a couple of people that lead that effort. Allison Cook, Executive Director of Government Affairs, and Kent Backus, Director of International Trade and Market Access. Allison, you have great experience on Capitol Hill, and I'd be curious to know, what are your recommendations for making certain that we get off on a good foot with this new Congress and new administration?
So one of the most important items is relationship building. As NCBA staff, we will need to get into those agencies, meet with those staffers, meet with their bosses, and make sure that we have good relationships. We will also go over to Capitol Hill and do the very same thing. We have a bunch of new members coming in, new staffers, and we need to make sure that when they have questions, NCBA is the first place that they call to ask those questions, and how does it affect the beef industry?
So we talk a lot about this lame duck session, but what can we realistically expect in the next couple of months?
So obviously this is a little bit of an uncertain time. We do know that the government runs out of funding on December 9th. So we will either have a continuing resolution where we kick the can down the road to the next Congress, or we will have an omnibus package. NCBA has quite a few priorities that we would love to see in an end-of-year package. If we don't get those in the end-of-year package, then we will simply move on to the next Congress and take care of business there.
Kent, TPP is an important topic, as we've already discussed this evening. I'm curious, what's your take on where we stand, and more importantly, what's the next step?
Well, you know, it's unfortunate that Congress has chosen not to take up the TPP during this post-election time period. So that means that we're going to have to look at a new path forward, whether it be through bilateral agreements or really trying to pick up TPP with the next Congress. But whatever happens, we're going to have to find a solution to address the $400,000 in lost sales that we're experiencing every day without TPP.
Seems to me the problem even becomes more challenging. I read this morning that we are going to be 5.7% over in terms of total beef produced this year than last year, and another 4.4% over that in 2017. What's the role of trade in that kind of production environment?
Well, when you consider the fact that exports alone account for about $300 per head, and a lot of what we export are what American consumers don't want to purchase here. So we're going to have a lot of product that we need to move. The only way to do that is through exports, and the best thing we can do is to tear down those tariff and non-tariff barriers into foreign markets so that we can compete on a level playing field for consumers who want to buy those products.
And what's your belief about the importance of imports? I hear that a lot wherever I go about the imports, particularly the Brazilian beef coming into the United States. What role do imports play in our U.S. beef industry?
When you think about it, a lot of what we import is lean beef. It's primarily from grass-finished cattle. You know, we roughly finish about 95% of our cattle on grain. So the only way to find a product to mix with our trimmings is to import that lean beef. So that's really what a lot of those imports come is. It's cheaper beef, it's grass finished, so that we can meet all that ground beef demand. Because we take the same cuts that we would otherwise use for grinding purposes, we sell at higher value products, things like the flat iron steak. Sure. So it's very important that we have those imports to offset that production. Otherwise, we would lose that demand to other proteins like pork and chicken.
Well, I hope you both have new shoes on your Christmas list, because you're going to need them as we move into this new year. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
They say tough times require a tough team. So if you'd like to support the beef industry, why not become an NCBA member? By doing so, you'll be sustaining the work of NCBA in defending and advocating for the cattle industry in Washington, D.C. It's easy to do. Just call toll-free 1-866-USA-BEEF or visit the website beefusa.org. Still ahead on this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen, we'll have more on what's happening here in Washington, D.C. and how federal policies and regulations may affect the cattle business in the coming year. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
It means you do what you say you'll do time and time again. Because performance isn't optional, and your task is essential. For over 95 years, we have proven ourselves to be the most dependable choice. That's why the cattlemen of this great nation trust Ritchie to provide fresh water on demand. Ritchie, proud to be a partner to the American cattlemen since 1921.
There is a new world out there, revealing itself in unpredictable ways. A world that demands more from the land and those who grow, farm, and build on it. This new world calls for the ingenuity to get more out of it while preserving as much as we can. After all, to stay ahead of tomorrow, we need to be equipped for it today. New Holland, equipped for a new world.
This is yours, and so is what grows there. Not theirs or theirs, yours. You need this to fight this and this to grow more this. Because the more of this you feed them, the less this you spend on that, which leaves more of this here. Don't let them take this from you. Chaparral takes care of weeds and brush, and that's that.
The 2017 Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show is set for Music City, Nashville, Tennessee. It's the cattle industry's biggest convention with education, networking, and fun. Plus, you can check out the huge NCBA Trade Show, outstanding entertainment, and much more. Mosey on down to Music City for the 2017 Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show, February 1st through the 3rd. Visit beefusa.org for more.
Welcome back. We're live from Washington, D.C., celebrating 500 episodes of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen and digging into some of the tough policy issues facing the beef cattle industry. Let's talk cattle markets. Craig Uden joins us again, along with Sarah Calhoun, Manager of Government Affairs for NCBA. Craig, I want to start with you. As a cattle feeder and cow-calf producer, both, tell folks what kind of impact these volatile markets have had on your own business.
You know, the last 18 months have not been very kind to the cattle feeder, and I'm no exception there. And now that I got a sizable cow-calf operation, this price decline has sure offset a lot of profitability there, and it's went down a lot faster than our fixed costs have went down. So I understand the pain that's out there in the country because it's a pretty dynamic move. I do not think that the industry was aware how fast and how efficient our production model was and how we put a lot of beef back on the table. Our increasing numbers have presented some challenges, but we're addressing those things as we go.
And other proteins as well. I read that the hog business has increased its sow numbers 136,000, just the top 35 hog producers. So it's protein in general, isn't it?
Right. You know, we're looking at a 7 to 9% increase in protein on all proteins domestically consumed since 2014. So it is a big issue out there, and there's a lot of hurdles. But, you know, the market went up really fast and went down, it seems like, even faster. And we feel it really out in the country.
So Sarah, tell me this, how has NCBA been engaged in addressing this price volatility?
Well, we have put together a working group with the CME. It's producer-led, and we have been identifying key objectives and concerns we have so we can ensure that the futures are a viable risk management tool for our industry.
And Craig, I know you're the chairman of that producer-led NCBA CME working group. Give folks a little background on what that group's about and what steps you've taken thus far.
Well, you know, a year ago, last convention, the live cattle marketing was charged with going out and seeing what was going on as a risk tool management tool. CME wasn't working for them. So we went out and, as we put that together and went around and tried to address all these issues, we found there was many issues. So we broke it down into 3 parts. We engaged with more of our industry partners, more producers throughout the United States, and we put 3 plans together, one addressing volatility, one addressing contract specs, and one addressing price discovery. So now we've been able to focus on those 3 categories and really dive in, and we're actually getting somewhere. We've got a great relationship now with the CME. We've met with the CME and the CFTC in D.C. and had a really good meeting that everybody understands a little more what the issue is.
So I'm curious, I mean, what are the next steps, and can you give us any insight into maybe some of the possible solutions that you all might be considering?
Well, CME suggested we needed more negotiated trade. So we've implemented some different, we've had meetings out in the country and people are negotiating trade more. Currently, the amount of cattle that are being negotiated or cash traded out there are the same levels as 2013, so we've stopped that from moving any farther. We're going to submit a letter to the CME about our opposition currently to cash settlement. And we're going to stay engaged with these folks all the way through. And I know Sarah's got one final point that she would like to make.
Yeah, Sarah, what do you have to add?
Well, I just think that everybody needs to do their part in the stewardship of this industry to contribute to negotiated trade. I mean, if you're using a formula, you're using, you know, a base price somewhere, and I think that it's really important that we have that organic or price discovery.
It's everybody's responsibility.
Absolutely.
Great perspective, guys. What you're doing is so critically important to the pocketbook and ultimately the sustainability of so many operations across the country. Thank you and good luck on the months ahead.
Thank you.
Producers tell us one of the things they value most about being a member of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association is the unified voice NCBA provides right here in Washington, D.C. We asked folks to share their thoughts on the value of NCBA working on their behalf in Washington.
My family chooses to be an NCBA member every year when it comes time to renew. One, the policy of the work that happens in Washington, D.C. is really important to us. The opportunity to continue to operate in an economically feasible way and still do what's good and desirable by consumers. All of that comes together, and so that's really important to us.
Well, I'm an NCBA member because I think membership in these kinds of organizations is the way that we move things forward. And so NCBA, being our national representative for cattle and cattle policies and land policies and those kinds of things, it's extremely important for all of us to be a member.
I'm an NCBA member because I am part of a group that helps fight for my rights to be doing what I love to do. I'm part of a group that's going to help fight for my children's, my grandchildren's rights. Somebody that's not, I might encourage them to take a look. If you're interested, ask someone. We can take you to meetings, we can show you material, we can talk to you about what we get done in D.C. There's a lot of opportunity in this organization, and we want folks to be a part of it.
There are many reasons to be a NCBA member, including some valuable incentives. You can find out more about NCBA membership by calling 1-866-USA-BEEF, or you can visit the website, that's beefusa.org. Cattlemen and women often face an onslaught of rules and regulations that can impact their day-to-day work. Here to talk about this issue is Jennifer Houston, NCBA Policy Division Chair and a Tennessee cattle producer, along with Scott Yeager. He's NCBA's Environmental Counsel. Thank you guys for coming and helping us celebrate 500 shows tonight.
Thank you for having us. That's a great accomplishment.
You know, Jennifer, I wanted to ask you, we know that cattle producers are some of the best environmental stewards, and Senator Dane said the same thing on this show just moments ago. But it seems like sometimes we're the first ones to get regulated. What can NCBA do to make certain that we are not burdened by this regulatory onslaught?
Well, you're right, Kevin. Cattlemen and cattlewomen across the U.S. are the original stewards of our environment. But having NCBA here in Washington, D.C., each and every day working for us, fighting us, allows us a seat at the table with our regulatory agencies, both before regulations are written and then as they're being propagated. But if, in fact, these regulations become overburdensome or unnecessarily costly, then we fight back through the court systems like we did with the Waters of the U.S. lawsuit.
You know, now that Donald Trump has been elected president, he talked a lot in his campaign about regulations and rolling back regulation. What's your read on what this means to the cattle producers?
Well, we're very hopeful that a Trump administration means an atmosphere of less regulation, less government overreach, which in the last few years has really infringed upon our property rights as U.S. cattlemen across the nation.
And Scott, you know, Jennifer talked about what might be done from a regulatory environment. Certainly the Supreme Court has a say in all that as well. What's your sense of what we're looking at going forward with the Supreme Court?
So we had a big champion for private property rights in the Supreme Court with Justice Scalia. And he passed away last year, and he left a big hole on that Supreme Court, and which leaves us with an 8-justice court, which is divided ideologically between conservatism and liberalism. And that makes it really difficult to get things done and have decisions made. But the news here is that the new administration, the new president, will have an opportunity to nominate a new Supreme Court justice to fill that role. And then the U.S. Senate will either confirm that person or deny them. And that 9th Supreme Court justice is going to be a big deal. He's going to be the tiebreaker for a lot of controversial issues and cases that we'll see coming into the future.
What are some of the specific regulatory issues that you see us needing to address even before the end of the year?
So the big thing coming into the end of the year is the appropriations process. The battles for a lot of policy issues and regulatory issues are going to be dealt with through this end of the year funding for the federal government. Last year, Congress got some policy riders into that omnibus package that were really good for our members. Things such as defunding for greenhouse gas reporting for livestock. And another example would be defunding of on-farm oil storage regulations for farmers. Those are things that are great for our guys. It reduces the regulatory burden a little bit, and we're going to continue to fight to try to keep those in the appropriations bills.
So you mentioned the millions of dollars that could be saved through defunding several of these policies. I guess the other question, we've talked a lot on this show, Scott, about waters of the United States. What do you perceive as the outcome and go-forward plan as it relates to the waters of the United States and the lawsuit that we're engaged in?
So there's two things. The defunding is a tool in the toolbox that we'll continue to pursue to get regulatory relief for our members. And the second part of that is, as far as the WOTUS lawsuit, it's something that we're litigating through the courts right now. The wrinkle here is that with the new Trump administration, he's made it a big campaign promise that he would rescind the WOTUS rule. So come January, we're going to be working hard to work with that new administration to make sure that he makes good on that promise. And then when that happens, we'll be able to put the lawsuit to bed and to claim victory on that issue.
That would be a big, big win for the beef cattle industry, and we appreciate you all's effort on that. Jennifer, one last question. How can producers, folks sitting at home, get involved in the policy process?
Well, you can get involved in the policy process starting at your county associations, your state association. If you have an issue that you think NCBA needs to speak up on, then just become involved. Go to your state association meeting, go to your county association meeting, because that's where all of our policy starts from, because NCBA truly is a grassroots organization that gets our marching orders straight from the farms and ranches across the nation.
Thank you both for coming to the show and adding your perspective on a couple of these very, very important issues. And good luck to you as you continue down the path with the Policy Committee, a very important committee to all of us as beef cattle producers.
Thank you.
We'll have more from Washington, D.C. on this special live edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Trial of calves on cows, parasite control with long range outperforms Cydectin and Safeguard dewormers combined by as much as an extra 40 pounds per head. I wonder what that'd feel like.
Do not treat within 48 days of slaughter. Not for use in female dairy cattle 20 months of age or older, including dry dairy cows or in veal calves. Post-injection site damage such as granulomas and necrosis can occur. These reactions have disappeared without treatment. You have a lot to gain with long range.
You know, there is a saying, hay lost in the field robs yield. That's why John Deere balers are designed with tightly spaced belts so you capture more crop in every pass. Compared to other balers with wide-spaced belt designs, John Deere balers let you put up more quality hay and put more money in your pocket. That's how we run. And that's why nothing runs like a Deere.
Well, I think a rancher has to be a steward of the land. There's nobody else that can take care of the land better than a rancher. When we switched over to the Purina products, it was a step in the right direction.
The difference we see in the cattle is the consistency of their nutrition.
The cattle hold their condition a lot better throughout the whole year.
It does make a difference that we can see, day in and day out.
Every truck can tow a boat. Every truck can climb a hill. Every truck can haul a trailer. But not everyone can say they're the fastest growing truck brand in America. Guts, glory, Ram.
Welcome back. We're proud to be celebrating 500 episodes of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen with a special live edition from our nation's capital. Joining me now to talk about public lands and the effort to defend grazing rights is Marcy Schloop, Associate Director for the Public Lands Council, and Kevin Kester. He's NCBA's Vice President and a California rancher. Thank you both for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Marcy, let's start with you. And why don't you just inform folks what public lands are and why they're so important to the United States beef cattle industry?
Well, public lands are a vital component to the beef industry, especially in the West, with 40% of the nation's cattle herd spending some time on those public lands. Our public lands ranchers own about 120 million acres of their own private land, and at the same time manage about 250 million acres of public lands. More broadly, because public lands are so easily regulated, we find ourselves to be kind of a laboratory or a testing ground for new regulations and policies. But more importantly, we also see that those regulations and those policies, they filter out onto the private lands and affect public lands ranchers and private land ranchers alike, the entire industry as a whole.
And I know one of the policies we talk a lot about on this show is the Endangered Species Act. Can you tell folks what reforms you think need to be made and what is the political outlook going forward on that issue?
The simple fact is that the Endangered Species Act is broken and has failed with only 1.4% of the listed species ever being deemed recovered under the Act. These species are being listed at such a rate, and these listing petitions are coming in so fervently that all the Fish and Wildlife Service has time to do is evaluate these petitions, make their listing determinations, only to turn around and have to defend those decisions in court, when what they should be able to do is develop a comprehensive recovery plan and implement measurable benchmarks for recovery that would lead to the eventual delisting of those species, and that's not happening right now. So these are changes that PLC and NCBA continue to advocate for and will continue to advocate for with the new administration and the next Congress.
And Kevin, I know a lot of Western ranchers like yourself are very familiar with the Endangered Species Act, but I guess the question is, do you see something like that impacting producers all across the country, or is this only focused on Western ranchers?
No, absolutely. There's a huge danger of this spreading across the country. We've dealt with it for years, specifically myself in California. We've had it for a long time on different listings, but the Upper Plains folks with the lesser chicken being potentially listed there felt some of the potential effects, but now there's talk of the monarch butterfly and bees potentially being listed. Can you imagine across the country the restrictions and loss of property rights if either one of those two species were ever to be listed? It'd affect the way we do business. So we need to take a look at the Endangered Species Act and get some reform. It's been more than 25 years since anything's been touched upon on the ESA, and we need to do something about it.
You know, another issue is the Antiquities Act and the millions of acres that have literally been locked up from ranchers all across the United States because of the Antiquities Act. What, in your opinion, type of reform needs to be made there, Kevin?
Well, number one, it's an act that's been in existence since 1906, and it can monuments can be put into effect by presidential proclamation with no oversight from Congress or anybody else. So there's millions of acres that have been abused by overreach of power from this current administration. The Obama administration is an example. And so what we need to do for reform is, there's been several bills in the current Congress. We need to carry them over to the new Congress and enact them where there's congressional oversight and authority as well as state oversight and authority to help get rid of this abuse.
Yeah. I want to ask one other question. Marcy mentioned some of the things relative to endangered species like the sage grouse. And Kevin, you and I both know that ranchers are already doing some really innovative things to protect the sage grouse themselves. Can you tell folks about some of those things that ranchers are implementing themselves, either one of you?
Go ahead, Marcy, if you... Well, there's been some negotiated plans formed on the greater sage grouse, and so unfortunately, I think the negotiated settlements are going to create some issues also because it's going to be very costly to implement those reforms. And so, as the Senator was saying earlier in the program, we need to go back and revisit that and get a better solution.
Yeah, there's not many ranchers that have the 1940s pickup truck that he was talking, and we probably need a reformed Endangered Species Act. Would you agree?
Absolutely. With the sage grouse alone, we have seen through programs like the Sage Grouse Initiative through NRCS that we've seen a 63% increase in the sage grouse population already. So we need to let these ranchers continue doing what they're doing, let the states lead these efforts, because obviously what they're doing is working.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you both for joining us this evening, and continue the fight, please.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, as cattle producers know very well, protecting the business climate for the industry often means defending against government overreach. You can help by becoming an NCBA member. Call toll-free 1-866-USA-BEEF or visit the website beefusa.org. Stay with us. There's more of this special edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen just ahead.
Sure, cattle bring in the profits, but Case IH equipment helps you do everything else.
There are many great reasons to join NCBA, and that includes exclusive NCBA member discounts and benefits from some outstanding companies.
Hi, this is Kerry Bastine, President of Roper Apparel and Footwear, Stetson Apparel Boots, and Tin Hall. We are very proud sponsors of the NCBA, and for all new members signing up with the NCBA, you get 50% off your first purchase, and for all Go Forward members, you get 25% off 4 times a year. Go to urbanwesternwear.com, click on the NCBA specials, use your coupon code for your first 50% off, and come back to Urban Western Wear all year long and use your 25% coupons that you'll find in the National Cattlemen's newspaper.
Big discounts on boots, clothing, and Western apparel is just one of the many amazing deals you get as an NCBA member. Don't miss out. Join NCBA today and enjoy these exclusive member discounts. Find out more at beefusa.org.
Sure, cattle bring in the profits, but Case IH equipment helps you do everything else.
Mosey on down to Music City and the 2017 Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show. It's the cattle industry's biggest convention, and there will be a special event held at the Country Music Hall of Fame. Plus, Cowboys Night at the Grand Ole Opry. It's the 2017 Cattle Industry Convention and NCBA Trade Show in Nashville, February 1st through the 3rd. Visit beefusa.org for more.
Parasites will lose you more money than any other disease out there besides infertility. So, parasites is something that we have to control, and that's what VetGun does for us. It's tough out there on a ranch, but with the ease of the VetGun, it's a one-man operation, and whenever you can get one thing to work out great throughout that day, it just makes my life a little easier.
We know who made that hitch. We know who cut the steel, who milled the ball, and who welded the seams. We know who tested, measured, and checked. We even know who thought the whole thing up. We're B&W, and we know your hitch. Because we don't make them halfway around the world. We make them all right here. B&W. Trusted.
Welcome back to this special edition of Cattlemen to Cattlemen as we come to you from our nation's capital. We appreciate you joining us. The 120th Annual Convention will be held in Nashville, Tennessee from February 1st through the 3rd. It's your opportunity to participate in shaping the future of our industry. Registration and housing are open now. Just visit beefusa.org. Kendall Frazier and Kevin Kester join me once again for some final thoughts on the policy issues facing the cattle industry in the year ahead. And Kevin, I want to start with you. We've talked a lot about issues ranging from TPP to Endangered Species Act, and one question that we haven't addressed is the whole tax issue. Tell us where we stand from a tax perspective, and what do you hope to accomplish under the new Trump administration?
Well, I'm truly excited to have some opportunity to work on some tax issues that are hugely important. In fact, in many cases, this is the #1 cattle industry issue, and that's regarding estate tax, or what we fondly refer to as the death tax. Right. So over the past several years, Congress has actually worked on, behind the scenes, a tax reform package, and due to political circumstances, never carried it forward. So in the new administration, we expect, based upon what we're hearing from Republican leadership, that that tax package in some form will be presented during this next session. So that gives us the opportunity to give an honest shot at repealing the death tax once and for all, as well as work on some other tax things like 2032A, which is a deduction on the estate tax return for putting assets over to family members and keeping them for a certain amount of time, and things like that, just in case we don't get the full repeal, because we do have a Senate. We don't have 60 votes to meet that filibuster threshold, so there's going to be negotiations forced with that kind of check and balance. So there's a bunch of important tax issues that we can work on over the next few months.
And what about Section 179? Give us an update on that. How important is that to cattlemen and women?
Sure. At the end of last year, we got Section 179 permanently extended with a huge increase in the amount allowable for deductions for capitalized business assets. So that was a great win for us. And so we got to make sure that we push back on any efforts to lower that threshold, which there'll be some people in Congress wanting to do that as trade-offs for other things. So we'll keep that, or even potentially increase that, hopefully. And so that's another issue that we're going to work hard on. Yep.
You know, we talk a lot on this show about the importance of becoming NCBA members, but it's important to be a member both of your state and national organization. I'm going to ask you both, Kendall, first with you. Why do you think it's so important that people write a check both to the state and national organization to become members of both entities?
Well, first of all, it's important that you get involved both at your state level, because then you can impact things and issues in your state legislature. If you get involved at the national level, you can impact things here in Washington, D.C., and you can become a part of a bigger group of cattlemen that are working together to protect and promote the interest of cattlemen, both at the state level and the national level.
And Kevin, what would you add to that?
Well, as I travel across the country, I deliver a message that people really don't believe, but a single person can make a true difference if you just participate in the process. And so I'd encourage my fellow ranchers across the nation, participate. It can be something as simple as writing a check, taking a little time to attend a meeting, but a single person, even in Washington, D.C., can truly make a difference to help our industry.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And tell folks a little bit about your journey in leadership, because you started at the local level as well, right?
Sure. I started as our local county cattlemen's association leadership as president, and then served on some committee leadership at the state level in California, went through the California Cattlemen's leadership through the presidency, got involved with NCBA on policy committee leadership, and got elected, fortunate to get elected to leadership on the officer team for NCBA, and if it can happen to me, it can happen to anybody that wants to be part of the process.
Yeah. And Kendall, one thing that I wanted to talk quickly about, boy, I was at the office today, and you've made a significant increase in the resources you all have devoted to the Washington, D.C. office. Tell folks about that.
Well, we have. We've added additional staff here in Washington, D.C., and I hope the viewers tonight have had a chance to meet some of those staff tonight that we've added here.
Talented team.
We do have a great talented team that we've put together here in Washington, D.C. And we've also added additional resources for our Washington office. And it was mentioned to fight legal battles. That's something now that we've got resources now that we can go to court to stop things like the waters of the United States and work on those kind of issues. So we've put additional resources back here. Washington, D.C. is a big factor in what goes on back here and how the business operations run out in the country. Yeah. So we're going to continue to do that and hopefully put more in the future.
You know, in addition to being a member, they can also, if they choose, become involved in the NCBA PAC. And Kevin, why don't you tell folks just a little bit about what that PAC is all about and how you choose to donate if you'd like to.
Sure, it goes hand in hand with efforts here in Washington, D.C. with our increased participation with our staff and expanding on those efforts. And to help staff be winners and have relationships on Capitol Hill, NCBA has a political action committee called our PAC. And so I encourage folks not only to become members of local, state, national cattlemen, like Kendall said, also consider contributing in any amount to our political action committee. I'm proud to say that NCBA over the past few years has grown our PAC to the #2 ag PAC in Washington, D.C.
That's great.
And our goal is to be #1, and we need your help out in the country to make that happen. In this last election, we had a 94% success rate.
NCBA PAC and NCBA are absolutely critical to our organization. Thank you both for coming to the show.
Thank you, Kevin.
Now is your opportunity to join the fight for the future of the beef cattle industry by becoming a member of NCBA. Just visit beefusa.org, or you can call 1-866-USA-BEEF and join today. Well, that wraps up this edition of NCBA's Cattlemen to Cattlemen. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate 500 episodes. I'd like to thank our NCBA leaders and members, and also you, our loyal viewers who support our program each and every week. From Washington, D.C., I'm Kevin Ochsner. We'll see you again next week, right here on RFD TV.